Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. The windshield wipers barely kept up with the rain that Thursday night in March, and my GPS showed another 40 miles to Indianapolis. Every muscle in my body ached from 12 straight hours behind the wheel, pushing through construction zones and detours that turned a simple drive into an endurance test. At 32, I'd gotten used to life as a pharmaceutical sales rep, bouncing between medical clinics across 3 states. But that didn't make the endless highways any easier. The roadside inn appeared through the downpour like a refuge. 2 stories of faded blue doors wrapped around a pothole-filled parking lot, the kind of place where truckers and traveling salespeople like me went to disappear for 8 hours before hitting the road again. The neon sign out front had maybe 4 working letters, casting this sickly yellow glow over the puddles, and I remember thinking that even this dump would feel like paradise after the day I'd had. The lobby smelled like mildew and whatever pine-scented chemical they used to mask it. Behind the desk sat this rail-thin kid, maybe 20, with gauged ears and a face full of acne scars, scrolling through his phone with the dedication of someone who'd perfected the art of ignoring customers. He slid a key card across the counter without making eye contact. Room 214, 2nd floor, end of the hallway. Dragging my suitcase up those concrete stairs felt like climbing a mountain, each step echoing off the walls in that hollow, empty way that makes you realize nobody builds these places to last. Room 214 sat wedged between a vending machine that rattled like it was trying to escape and what looked like a maintenance closet with a water-stained "Do Not Enter" sign hanging by one piece of tape. The second I opened my door, I heard them. Voices from room 216, already raised in anger. The woman's cigarette-rough voice cut through the wall like a rusty knife, while the man's words stumbled over each other, thick with alcohol and rage. I tried to ignore them at first, focusing on peeling off my rain-soaked jacket and kicking off shoes that squelched with every step. The room was exactly what you'd expect for $59 a night. A queen bed with a comforter that had mysterious stains despite being supposedly clean, a tube TV from the 90s bolted to the dresser, and carpet that had probably been beige once but now existed in some indefinable color, between brown and gray. The arguing next door escalated while I unpacked my overnight bag, their words becoming clearer through the paper-thin walls. She kept screaming about some woman named Vanessa, accusing him of meeting her at the truck stop, while he roared back that she was paranoid and crazy. Then came the crash, something heavy hitting their wall so hard that my mirror rattled. A door slammed, and suddenly their fight spilled into the hallway, her shrieking echoing off every surface while his boots stomped back and forth on that industrial carpet. Through the peephole, I watched them in that fishbowl distortion. She was maybe 45, wearing a faded Harley-Davidson tank top that exposed arms covered in blurry tattoos, her bleached hair hanging in greasy strands around a face twisted with fury. He towered over her, this massive guy in a flannel shirt with the sleeves torn off, revealing thick arms that he kept clenching and unclenching while he swayed on his feet. She shoved him hard enough that he stumbled backward into the wall opposite their door, and that's when he noticed me watching. Not directly, but he must have sensed movement at my peephole because his bloodshot eyes snapped toward my door. I jerked back, heart hammering, and heard him say something to her about that bitch in 214 before she grabbed his arm and yanked him back toward their room. For maybe 10 minutes after their door slammed shut, I sat on the edge of my bed still fully dressed, debating whether to call down to the front desk or just try to sleep through whatever drama was unfolding next door. The relative quiet didn't last long. Around 11:30, just as I'd finally changed into pajamas and was trying to find something watchable on the ancient TV, the pounding started on my door. Not knocking, pounding, like someone trying to break through with their fist. "I know you called them," the man's voice boomed from the other side, each word soaked in bourbon or whiskey or whatever poison he'd been drinking. "Open this door right now. You got no business calling nobody about me and mine." My whole body went rigid as I sat there in my oversized t-shirt and shorts, remote control clutched in my hand like some useless weapon. He kept hammering on the door, and I could see it actually flexing inward with each blow, that cheap hollow wood bending under his assault. The chain lock and deadbolt suddenly seemed laughably inadequate. "I saw you watching through your little hole, you nosy bitch. Think you're better than us? Think you can just call whoever you want?" The irony was that I hadn't called anyone, hadn't even picked up the phone, but there was no way I was going to open that door to explain. His girlfriend joined him in the hallway, and I could hear her trying to pull him away, but her voice had changed from angry to something else, almost gleeful. "Bobby, come on, leave her alone," she said, but then added louder, definitely meant for me to hear. "We'll deal with this different. I got cousins 20 minutes from here. My cousin Ricky just got out, and he owes me a favor. We'll handle this the right way." Bobby, at least now I had a name for the mountain of rage outside my door, gave one final slam that made the doorframe crack audibly before letting her lead him away. Through the peephole, I watched them stumble back to 216, her whispering in his ear while shooting glances back at my door. The way she smiled while doing it made my intestines twist into knots. I immediately called the front desk, my voice shaking as I told the kid what happened. He sounded bored, maybe even annoyed, but said he'd send security up. Security turned out to be a 60-year-old man in an ill-fitting uniform who looked like he couldn't secure a sandwich, let alone handle Bobby. The security guard, whose name tag read Earl in faded letters, knocked on their door twice before Bobby yanked it open. Even from my cracked door where I watched, I could see Earl take an involuntary step backward. Bobby stood there in nothing but boxers and work boots, his hairy gut hanging over the waistband, still swaying like a tree in a storm. "Sir, we've had a complaint about noise and threatening behavior," Earl said, his voice cracking like a teenager's. Bobby laughed, this deep, ugly sound that seemed to come from somewhere dark inside him. "Complaint? That lying bitch next door called you? She's been listening to us all night, probably getting off on it." Earl tried to maintain some authority, his hand hovering near the radio on his belt, but we all knew that radio was his only real power. The girlfriend appeared behind Bobby, now wearing a ratty bathrobe that barely covered her, and she started her performance. Tears, apologies, promises they'd keep it down. She was good at it too, switching from threatening to pathetic in seconds, explaining how they'd just gotten bad news about Bobby's father and emotions were running high. Earl bought it completely, or maybe he just wanted an excuse to leave. He gave them what he probably thought was a stern warning, threw a glance at my door that seemed to say, "Stop causing trouble," and shuffled back toward the stairs. The second Earl disappeared, Bobby turned to my door and made a throat-cutting gesture with his thick finger, mouthing words I couldn't hear but definitely understood. They went back into their room, but now I could hear them talking, not yelling, which was somehow worse. The girlfriend's raspy voice carried through the wall. "I'm texting Ricky right now. Him and Tommy can be here in 20 minutes. That bitch wants to play games, we'll show her games." My phone battery was at 12%, and the charger was in my car. I threw on my jeans and jacket over my pajama shirt, shoved my wallet and keys in my pocket, and started packing everything else frantically into my suitcase. Every sound from next door made me pause. Footsteps, low voices, and then what sounded like furniture being moved around. At 12:47 a.m., I know the exact time because I kept checking my dying phone, I heard car doors slamming in the parking lot below. Through my window, which faced the front, I saw a beaten-up Chevrolet Silverado with those ridiculous raised wheels parked crooked across two spaces. Two men got out, and even from the second floor I could tell they were trouble. The driver was skinny but tall, wearing a white tank top despite the cold, with arms covered in what looked like prison tattoos. The passenger was shorter but built like a refrigerator, bald head gleaming under the parking lot lights. They didn't walk toward the lobby. They headed straight for the exterior stairs, like they knew exactly where they were going. That's when I knew I had to leave immediately. I grabbed my suitcase and purse, not even bothering to zip anything properly, and crept to my door. Through the peephole, I could see the hallway was empty, but I could hear new voices in room 216, male voices that hadn't been there before. They were laughing about something, and then I heard Bobby say my room number clear as day. The stairwell at the opposite end of the hallway, the one near the broken ice machine, was my only option since Ricky and Tommy had come up the stairs near room 216. I slipped out of my room as quietly as possible, not even letting the door click shut behind me, and practically ran down that hallway in my socks, dragging my suitcase with the wheels up so they wouldn't make noise. Behind me, I heard their door open just as I reached the stairwell. "Where'd that bitch go?" Bobby's drunk voice echoed down the hallway. My car was parked on the opposite side of the building from their truck, a small Mercy. I threw my suitcase in the back seat and started the engine with shaking fingers, not even putting on my seatbelt before throwing it in reverse. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw them in my rearview mirror. 4 figures standing in the second-floor hallway outside my room, Bobby's massive frame unmistakable even from a distance. The girlfriend was pointing at my car, and I saw the 2 new guys start running toward the stairs. I floored it out of that parking lot, my little Ford Focus screaming as I pushed it harder than I ever had before. The rain had stopped, but the roads were still slick, and I took the on-ramp to I-70 at probably twice the safe speed, my car fishtailing slightly before finding grip. For the first 5 miles, I kept checking my mirrors obsessively, convinced I'd see that jacked-up Silverado's headlights bearing down on me any second. Every pair of high beams made my chest tighten until they passed or turned off. I didn't slow down until I'd put at least 15 miles between me and that hellhole of a hotel. My phone finally died completely somewhere around the 10-mile mark, leaving me with no GPS and no way to call for help if they somehow caught up. But I knew there was a 24-hour truck stop about 30 miles ahead. I'd stopped there for coffee on my way through before. I made it there in under 20 minutes, probably collecting several speeding tickets from traffic cameras I was too panicked to care about. The truck stop was lit up like a football stadium, full of semis and a few other cars. Blessed normalcy after the nightmare I'd just escaped. I parked right in front of the main entrance, under the brightest lights I could find, and sat there for probably 10 minutes just breathing and watching for that Silverado. When I finally went inside, the night manager, this older black woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses, took one look at my face and asked if I needed her to call someone. I borrowed her phone charger and called the police from the truck stop, filing a report about the threats and harassment. They said without physical harm or property damage, there wasn't much they could do except maybe send someone to check on the hotel. I spent the rest of the night in that truck stop, drinking terrible coffee and jumping every time someone new walked in. Around 6 a.m., when the sun finally came up and the normal morning crowd started filing in, I felt safe enough to continue my drive. I never went back to that hotel chain again, and for months afterward, I paid extra for better hotels with actual security and proper doors. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen that truck pull up, if I'd waited even 5 more minutes to leave. I'd been manning the front desk at the Starlight Motor Lodge for about 6 months when it happened. 22 years old, drowning in student loan debt from a community college degree that wasn't getting me anywhere. I needed whatever work I could find. The overnight shift paid an extra $3 an hour, and honestly, sitting alone in a quiet lobby from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. seemed like a decent deal. My manager Diane, this chain-smoking woman who always reeked of too much perfume, had made it sound simple enough when she hired me. "Keep the coffee fresh, stay awake, maybe check in a trucker or two," she'd said, already lighting up a cigarette as she walked me through the basics. The motel sat 40 miles outside Denver, right off a stretch of highway that got pretty desolate after dark. Most nights were mind-numbingly boring, exactly what I'd signed up for. I could study for my IT certifications, watch Netflix on my laptop, basically get paid to sit there. Until that Friday night in early November when a man showed up who made me realize just how vulnerable I really was. That particular night had started with an unexpected cold snap, the kind that makes you dig out your winter coat earlier than planned. Around 1 a.m., I was settled behind the reception desk, clicking through coding tutorials, while the building's ancient heating system coughed and sputtered overhead. The lobby wasn't much to look at. Wood paneling straight out of 1975, 2 leather chairs with splits down the middle that leaked yellow foam, and a coffee maker that turned everything into liquid tar. Through the wall of windows facing the parking lot, our flickering neon vacancy sign painted everything in waves of red light, making the empty spaces between parked cars look deeper than they actually were. We had maybe 8 rooms filled, a family with 2 kids who checked in around dinner, plus our usual handful of construction workers who rented by the week. The fluorescent tubes above me buzzed their constant electric hum, and I had one earbud in, half paying attention to a podcast about network protocols while keeping my other ear free for the bell that would chime if anyone pushed through the front door. Around 1:47 a.m., I remember the exact time because I'd just glanced at the computer clock. I noticed movement in the parking lot. At first, I figured it was just someone from one of the rooms heading to their car for something they'd forgotten. But the way this person moved caught my attention. He was walking between the parked cars in this weird, indirect path, like he was trying to stay in the shadows cast by our one working streetlight. Male, probably mid-30s, wearing a dark jacket despite the cold and jeans that looked wet at the bottom, like he'd been walking through the drainage ditch that ran behind the property. He kept stopping every few steps, turning his head slowly to scan the windows of the ground floor rooms. The way he moved reminded me of someone casing a place, checking for witnesses. I pulled out my earbud completely and minimized my laptop screen, suddenly very aware that I was the only employee here, that the nearest police station was 25 minutes away on a good day. The man disappeared from view for maybe 30 seconds, hidden by a pickup truck parked near the lobby entrance. When he emerged, he was closer, maybe 15 feet from the main doors. Under the harsh white light of our entrance area, I got my first real look at him. Thin face, patchy beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in weeks, and eyes that kept darting around like a cornered animal. His right hand was tucked inside his jacket, holding something close to his body, and that's when I saw it. The unmistakable outline of a pistol grip printing through the fabric. My mouth went completely dry. He wasn't here for a room. The way he kept that hand pressed against his side, the way he was studying the lobby through the glass like he was memorizing the layout, everything about his body language screamed wrong. I reached under the desk where Diane had shown me the emergency button that would alert the police, but my fingers were trembling so bad I could barely feel the plastic casing. He started walking toward the entrance, and each step made my chest tighten like someone was slowly turning a vise. The automatic doors were turned off after midnight, another cost-cutting measure, so the only way in was to pull the handle. I watched him reach for it with his left hand, the right still buried in that jacket, still gripping whatever he had in there. The handle rattled as he tugged, and thank God, thank everything holy, I'd actually remembered to lock it at midnight like I was supposed to. His face changed when the door didn't budge, morphing from focused determination to this flash of pure rage that made my whole body go rigid. He yanked harder, making the glass shake in its frame, and that's when he looked directly at me. Not through me, not past me, at me, like he'd known I was there all along and had just been pretending not to notice. He pressed his face against the glass, leaving fog marks with his breath, and mouthed something I couldn't understand. Then he pulled the gun partially out of his jacket, just enough so I could see the black metal, and pointed at the door lock with his other hand. I knew exactly what he wanted, and every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get out through the back office, to put as much distance between me and that door as possible. But I couldn't move. It was like my legs had turned into concrete pillars, keeping me frozen behind that desk, while this man stood 3 inches of glass away from me with a weapon. He started pounding on the door with his free hand, hard enough that the impact echoed through the empty lobby. "Open up!" he shouted, his voice muffled but still clear enough to hear the desperation in it. "I know you're in there, just open the door." His breath was coming out in these big white clouds that spread across the glass, and I could see spit flying from his mouth as he yelled. Behind him, the parking lot was completely still, No headlights on the highway. No one stepping out for a smoke, just him and me and that door between us. My hand finally found the panic button and I pressed it, held it down for the required 3 seconds that would send a silent alarm to the police station. But 3 seconds feels like 3 hours when someone's trying to break down a door to get to you. The pounding got worse, and then he did something that made every hair on my arm stand straight up. He took 3 steps back, pulled the gun completely out of his jacket, and aimed it directly at the lock mechanism. I hit the floor behind the desk so fast I scraped both knees on the rough carpet, just as the first shot rang out. The sound was incredible, not like in movies where it's this controlled pop, but a crushing explosion that seemed to shake the entire building. Glass didn't shatter everywhere like I expected. Instead, there was just this perfect hole surrounded by a spider web of cracks right where the lock had been. I heard him pulling at the door again, cursing when it still wouldn't open. The deadbolt at the top was still engaged, the one I'd flipped out of habit even though Diane always said one lock was enough. From my position on the floor, I could see under the desk to where his feet were shuffling outside, kicking at the bottom of the door frame like he was trying to force it off its track. Then came the second shot, aimed higher, and this time a chunk of glass did fall, scattering across the lobby floor in pieces that caught the red neon light like broken rubies. I army crawled toward the back office, my phone in my pocket pressing hard against my hip, remembering suddenly that I had it, that I could call 911 myself instead of just hoping that silent alarm actually worked. Behind me, I heard him reaching through the hole he'd made, grunting as he tried to find the deadbolt from the inside. His arm wasn't long enough. The bolt was set too far from the door frame, and his frustrated screaming was getting louder, more unhinged. "You think you're smart," he kept shouting. "You think this is gonna stop me?" I made it to the office doorway and pulled out my phone, my fingers slipping on the screen as I tried to unlock it. Through the doorway, I could see him pulling his arm back out, and then he started shooting again. 3 more shots in rapid succession, each one punching another hole through the glass, expanding his reach. The sound of my own breathing was so loud in my ears I could barely hear the dispatcher when the call connected. 911, what's your emergency? The woman's voice was calm, professional, everything I wasn't in that moment. I tried to speak but only managed this weird croaking sound, so I swallowed hard and forced the words out. Starlight Motor Lodge, Highway 285. There's a man with a gun. He's shooting through the door trying to break in. I could hear myself talking too fast. Words running together, but I couldn't slow down. "How many shots fired?" she asked, and I realized I'd lost count after 5. 5, maybe 6, I said, pressing myself against the office wall. "He's still here, still trying to get in." She told me units were already responding to the silent alarm, ETA 12 minutes, and those 2 numbers, 1 and 2, might as well have been infinity. Through the doorway, I could see the man had stopped shooting. He was standing perfectly still, head tilted like he was listening for something. Then he looked straight through the holes he'd made, scanning the lobby, and even though I was hidden in the office, I held my breath like he could hear me breathing from 30 feet away. What happened next still doesn't make complete sense to me. He suddenly jerked his head toward the parking lot, like someone had called his name, and took 2 quick steps backward. A pair of headlights swept across the front of the building. Someone pulling into the lot, probably a late-night trucker looking for a room. The man looked between the approaching vehicle and the destroyed door, then did something with his gun that made a clicking sound, like he was checking the chamber or maybe putting the safety back on. He turned and ran, not toward the highway like I expected, but straight into the field behind the motel, stumbling through the tall grass until the darkness swallowed him completely. The headlights belonged to a semi that parked right in front of the lobby, and this huge bearded guy climbed out, took one look at the door with its constellation of bullet holes, and immediately got back in his truck. I watched him on his phone, probably calling the cops himself while I stayed crouched in that office, unable to convince myself it was really over, that the man wasn't circling back around to try again. The police showed up in 9 minutes, not 12. 3 squad cars with lights blazing, officers spreading out across the property with flashlights and drawn weapons. One of them, a younger guy with a shaved head who introduced himself as Officer Brennan, found me still sitting on the office floor with my phone clutched in both hands. He had to tell me 3 times it was safe to come out before I actually believed him. They searched for 2 hours, brought in dogs that tracked the man's scent through the field until it disappeared at a creek about a mile away. The detective who took my statement, a woman with tired eyes who'd probably seen worse but still seemed genuinely concerned, told me the guy matched the description of someone who'd robbed 2 gas stations in the county that week. "You did everything right," she kept saying, like she knew I was replaying every second in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. They pulled security footage from our one working camera, got a partial license plate from a car that had been parked down the highway and sped off right after the shooting started. Diane showed up around 4 a.m., still in her pajamas with a coat thrown over them, and just stared at the ruined door for a full minute before asking if I was okay. I finished that shift because I didn't know what else to do, sitting in the lobby while Diane called someone to board up the door, watching the sun come up over the empty field where the man had vanished. 2 guests checked out early after seeing the bullet holes, and I couldn't blame them. I gave Diane my 2 weeks' notice that morning, and she didn't try to talk me out of it. They never caught the guy, at least not that I heard about. Sometimes I check the news from that area, looking for stories about robberies or arrests, hoping to see a mugshot that matches the face pressed against that glass. I work IT support now, boring office job with normal hours and security guards in the building, and that's exactly how I like it. But on cold nights when I'm walking to my car after working late and the parking lot is too quiet, I still find myself checking shadows between vehicles, still remember the sound of that glass cracking, the weight of those 12 minutes when I thought they'd be my last. People ask sometimes why I'm so obsessive about locking doors, why I always sit where I can see the exits, and I just tell them I'm cautious by nature. It's easier than explaining that one November night when I learned what it feels like to be hunted, to have nothing but a piece of glass and pure luck standing between you and someone who wants to hurt you. Four of us had booked a suite at the Grandview Hotel downtown for Ashley's bachelorette weekend in early October 2022. I was the maid of honor, and honestly, I'd been planning this trip for months. Ashley and I had been best friends since college, and the other 2 girls, Megan and Jenna, were her cousins from California. The Grandview wasn't exactly 5-star luxury, but it had this trendy rooftop bar and a nice lobby area with live music on weekends. We'd gotten there Friday afternoon, dumped our bags in the room on the 8th floor, and immediately started getting ready for the night. The plan was simple: dinner at that fancy steakhouse across the street, then bar hopping until we couldn't walk straight anymore. You know how these weekends go, or at least how they're supposed to go. The lobby bar was packed when we came back around 9 that night, deciding to have a few drinks at the hotel before heading out again. There was this jazz trio playing, and the atmosphere was actually pretty great. We grabbed a table near the windows, ordered a round of Cosmopolitans because Ashley insisted on being classic, and that's when we started chatting with the group at the next table. 3 guys and 2 women, all dressed like they'd come from some corporate event. They introduced themselves as consultants from Chicago, in town for a conference. The one who did most of the talking, Brandon, had this polished way about him. Expensive watch, perfect teeth, kept buying rounds for everyone. His colleague, a woman named Claire, was telling us about all the best clubs in the city, writing down addresses on cocktail napkins. They seemed normal enough, maybe a little too eager to party with us, but nothing that raised any red flags at the time. We ended up staying at that bar way longer than planned, probably until midnight or so. Ashley was having a blast, doing these ridiculous poses for photos with everyone, including Brandon's group. At some point, Megan had to run up to the room because she'd forgotten her ID, and Brandon actually offered to walk her up since he said he needed to grab something from his room too. She laughed it off, said she was fine, but he kept insisting it wasn't safe for a woman alone in the elevators that late. Eventually, one of his friends, this quiet guy named Paul, told him to knock it off, that he was being weird. We all laughed about it, Brandon apologized and blamed the whiskey, bought another round. But I remember noticing how he watched Megan walk to the elevators, how he knew exactly how long she was gone. 12 minutes, he mentioned it when she came back. Claire kept the conversation going, showing us pictures from their conference, but Brandon's eyes kept drifting to our table, specifically to our hands whenever we'd set down our room keys. Around 1 in the morning, Jenna was starting to fade. She's always been a lightweight, so we decided to call it a night. The consultants were still going strong, trying to convince us to hit this 24-hour karaoke place about 10 blocks away. Ashley actually wanted to go, but I played the responsible maid of honor card and said we had spa appointments in the morning, which was true. Brandon made this big show of being disappointed, gave Ashley this long hug goodbye that made me uncomfortable, his hand lingering on her lower back. Claire exchanged numbers with Megan, promising to text her about some sample sale happening that weekend. As we waited for the elevator, I noticed Brandon's group wasn't far behind us, but then they turned toward the lobby exit instead. Paul waved goodbye, and something about his expression seemed almost apologetic, like he was embarrassed by his colleagues. The elevator ride up was filled with Ashley gushing about how cool they were, especially Brandon, while I kept thinking about how he'd counted those 12 minutes. We got to our suite and basically passed out immediately, Ashley and I in one bed, Megan and Jenna in the other. The room was on the corner of the 8th floor, with windows facing both the main street and the side alley. I remember setting my phone to charge on the nightstand and noticing it was 1:47 a.m. before everything went dark. Then at 3:22 a.m., I know the exact time because I looked at my phone immediately. I woke up to this sound at our door. It wasn't knocking, more like a soft scratching, like someone was trying to slide something into the card reader. You know that electronic beep when a key card gets rejected? That's what actually woke me. Beep. Pause. Beep. Pause. Then I heard whispering, at least 2 voices, maybe 3, right outside our door. My whole body went rigid. I reached over and grabbed Ashley's arm, squeezing until she made this confused grunt, and I whispered that someone was trying to get in. The beeping stopped for maybe 30 seconds, and I started thinking maybe they'd given up. Maybe it was just drunk guests at the wrong room. Then we heard the handle jiggling, really aggressive this time, like someone was putting their weight against the door while turning it. Ashley shot up in bed, suddenly completely awake. Jenna stirred in the other bed and mumbled something about keeping it down. That's when we heard a man's voice, crystal clear through the door. "Ashley, come on, open up. You left your purse at the bar." But here's the thing. Ashley's purse was right there on the dresser. I could see it in the light from the street coming through the curtains. And the voice, it was trying to sound like Brandon, but it was different, forced, like someone imitating him. Ashley grabbed my hand so hard her nails dug into my palm. The handle jiggled again, harder, and then we heard a different voice, younger, nervous. "Maybe try the other one again." The other one? What other one? That's when real panic set in. I grabbed my phone and immediately called the front desk while Ashley shook Megan and Jenna awake. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Why the hell was nobody answering at the front desk of a major hotel? Finally, on the 5th ring, a tired-sounding woman picked up. I was trying to whisper but also make sure she understood the urgency. "Someone's trying to break into room 8117. They have a key card. They keep trying it. Please send security now." She asked me to repeat the room number, and in those few seconds of me talking louder, the noises outside stopped completely. Dead silence. The woman said security would be right up, but I just knew, that whoever was outside had heard me on the phone. Megan was at the door now, looking through the peephole, and she suddenly jerked back like she'd been shocked. "There's someone standing right there," she whispered. "He's wearing something over his face like a ski mask. Jesus Christ, he's just standing there staring at the peephole." We all huddled together on the far bed, watching the door. My phone showed 3:26 a.m. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. Then we heard footsteps moving away, not toward the elevators but toward the stairwell at the end of the hall. The stairwell door made this distinctive metallic clang when it closed, the same door we'd used earlier when the elevator was taking too long. About 30 seconds after that, we heard running footsteps in the hallway, multiple people, and then aggressive knocking. "Hotel security, room 8117. Relief flooded through me so hard I actually felt dizzy. But when I went to look through the peephole, Megan grabbed my arm. "What if it's them?" she said. "What if they're pretending?" And honestly, after what we'd just experienced, it didn't seem impossible. I called the front desk again. The same woman answered, and I asked her to confirm she'd sent security. She said yes, 2 officers, one named James and one named Kyle. I asked what they looked like and she seemed confused, but told me James was tall and bald. Kyle was shorter with a beard. When I looked through the peephole, that's exactly who was standing there, uniformed and everything. The moment we opened the door, James asked if we were all okay while Kyle was already on his radio calling for backup and asking someone to review security footage from the past hour. They had us describe everything: the voices, the keycard attempts, the man in the mask. James pulled out his phone and showed us a screenshot from the hallway camera taken just minutes before. The image made my throat close up. 3 men in dark clothes, all wearing different face coverings. One had a ski mask like Megan described, another had what looked like a bandana, and the third had some kind of Halloween mask, maybe a zombie or something. They were clustered around our door and one was holding what James said looked like a master keycard programmer. The kind maintenance uses but smaller, definitely not something you can just buy. Kyle mentioned they'd gotten reports of similar attempts on floors 6 and 7 about 20 minutes before ours, which explained the "try the other one" comment. They weren't just randomly trying, they had a system, they had tools, and they had information about which rooms had groups of women. James asked us about the bar, if we'd talked to anyone, and my heart just sank as I described Brandon's group. I mentioned how he'd watched Megan, counted the minutes, the way he'd focused on our room keys. James and Kyle exchanged this look that told me everything. Kyle said they'd need to review lobby footage, but groups like this often worked exactly that way. The charming ones make contact, get information, maybe slip something in a drink if they get the chance, while others wait for the right moment. They'd been seeing this pattern more frequently. Organized groups targeting bachelorette parties, girls' trips, any situation where women might be drinking and vulnerable. The stolen key cards were probably lifted from housekeeping carts or cloned from legitimate cards. Brandon had probably photographed our keys when we set them on the table, sent the info to someone who could make duplicates. James said we were lucky. That calling when we did probably saved us from something much worse. The men knew security was coming and had to abandon whatever they'd planned. The police arrived about 15 minutes later, 2 detectives who specialized in what they called organized predatory crimes. They had us walk through everything again, took our phones to screenshot the numbers Claire had shared with Megan, which, surprise, were already disconnected. They found footage of Brandon's group leaving through the lobby, then 3 different men entering through a side door about an hour later. Here's what really got me. The detectives said one of them was wearing the exact same expensive watch Brandon had been wearing. They weren't even different people. It was the same group. They'd just changed clothes and put on masks. Claire was probably in on it too, keeping us distracted, gathering information about where we were from, how long we were staying, if we had boyfriends or husbands who might come looking. The detectives found their conference registration, but it was all fake. The company didn't exist. The names were aliases. The credit card used for their rooms was stolen. They'd checked out electronically at 2 a.m., probably right before attempting to get into our room. We spent the rest of the night in the hotel's security office because they needed to process our room as a crime scene, dust for prints on the door handle and card reader. Around 6 a.m., they moved us to a different room on another floor, but none of us could sleep. We just sat there in silence. Occasionally, one of us would start crying and the others would huddle around. The detective, a woman named Officer Ramirez, sat with us for a while and explained that these trafficking rings were getting smarter, more organized. They don't grab women off the street anymore. They identify targets in social settings, use technology and social engineering. work in coordinated teams. She said if that masked man had managed to drag one of us to the stairwell, there were probably others waiting in a van in that side alley our room overlooked. We would have disappeared, and the fake identities meant tracking them would have been nearly impossible. Ashley hasn't had a drink since that night. Can't even walk into a hotel bar without panicking. Megan moved back in with her parents. Jenna started carrying pepper spray and a personal alarm everywhere. And me? I can't stop thinking about how friendly they seemed, how normal the whole interaction was, how we almost went to that karaoke place with them. One different decision and this story would have had a very different ending. One I probably wouldn't be here to tell. I was 16 when my family decided to take a vacation to Florida during spring break of 2017. My dad had just gotten a promotion at his accounting firm, and he wanted to celebrate by taking us somewhere nice for once. We weren't exactly poor, but family trips usually meant camping at state parks or visiting my Aunt Deborah in Kansas. This time, he'd booked us into the Coral Bay Resort, this massive beachfront hotel in Fort Myers with 3 pools and a tiki bar that my mom couldn't stop talking about. I remember being excited about the whole thing, the 12-hour drive from Ohio, the promise of actual room service, and especially the fact that I'd have my own adjoining room connected to my parents' suite. It felt grown up, like they finally trusted me enough to give me some space. My little sister Katie would be sleeping on the pull-out couch in their room, which meant I'd have privacy to stay up late texting my girlfriend without anyone bothering me. The first 2 days were exactly what you'd expect from a Florida vacation. Too much sun, overpriced seafood, and my dad constantly reapplying sunscreen on his already lobster-red shoulders. On that third night, Wednesday, we'd spent the entire day at this water park about 40 minutes from the hotel. I was exhausted in that specific way where your whole body feels heavy from chlorine and sun exposure. We got back around 9, ordered pizza to the room, and I was passed out by 10:30. My room was on the 7th floor facing the ocean, with this wide sliding glass door that led out to a narrow balcony. Before bed, I'd made sure to lock it and pull the curtains most of the way closed, leaving just a small gap because I liked seeing the moon reflect off the water. The AC was humming that steady white noise that expensive hotels have, and I remember thinking how comfortable the bed was compared to my lumpy mattress at home. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up. Not the gradual kind of waking where you drift in and out of sleep, but that sudden, jarring awareness like someone had flipped a switch in my brain. The room was mostly dark except for that thin strip of moonlight coming through the gap in the curtains. At first, I figured I just needed to use the bathroom. Too much soda at dinner always did that to me. But when I tried to sit up, nothing happened. My brain was sending the signals. I could feel the intention to move, but my body stayed completely still. I'd heard about sleep paralysis before, seen videos about it online, but experiencing it was something else entirely. It felt like someone had replaced my blood with concrete. I could move my eyes, could breathe, but everything else was locked in place. The panic started creeping in, that primal feeling when your body won't obey your commands. I tried to call out, to yell for my parents in the next room, but my voice wouldn't work either. Just this weak wheeze that barely made it past my lips. That's when I noticed the balcony door. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see it clearly in the moonlight, and my heart started hammering so hard, I thought it might burst through my chest. The door was sliding open. Not fast, not like someone was rushing, but this deliberate, careful movement that took maybe 15 seconds from start to finish. The metal track made this soft grinding sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. I watched, completely helpless, as a figure stepped through. He was tall, maybe 6'2" or 6'3", wearing what looked like dark work clothes, the kind maintenance guys wear. But it was 3 in the morning and I just knew this wasn't hotel staff. He stood there for a moment, silhouetted against the ocean backdrop, and then he turned toward me. His face was partially hidden by a baseball cap pulled low, but I could see he had a thick beard that went down to his chest, streaked with gray. He smelled like cigarettes and something else, something chemical like paint thinner or cleaning solution. He didn't rush toward me or ransack the room looking for valuables. Instead, he walked with this unnerving calmness, each step deliberate and nearly silent on the hotel carpet. He stopped at the foot of my bed and just stood there, watching me. His breathing was heavy and ragged, like he'd been running or climbing, which made sense since we were 7 floors up and he'd somehow gotten onto our balcony. His head tilted slightly to one side, the way a dog does when it's trying to understand something. I could see his eyes now. They were this pale gray color that looked almost white in the darkness, and they never blinked. Not once in what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. He reached into his pocket, and I thought this was it. He was going to pull out a knife or gun, but instead he took out a small digital camera, the kind people used before smartphones took over. He raised it slowly, pointed it at me, and the flash went off. The sudden brightness was blinding, leaving purple spots dancing in my vision. After the photo, he moved closer, walking around to the side of the bed where I was lying. His boots left dark marks on the carpet. I could see mud caking off with each step, little clumps that would later prove I hadn't imagined this whole thing. He leaned down close enough that I could see the individual gray hairs in his beard, could smell the sourness of his breath. His lips moved like he was talking, but no sound came out, just these exaggerated mouth movements, like he was mouthing words in slow motion. His hand reached toward my face, fingers stained yellow from nicotine, nails dirty and jagged. Just as his index finger was about to touch my cheek, something inside me snapped. Whatever had been holding my body prisoner suddenly let go, and I screamed. Not a normal scream, but this raw, terrified sound that ripped out of my throat and probably woke up half the hotel floor. The man jerked back like I'd slapped him, his pale eyes going wide with what looked like genuine surprise. He stumbled backward, knocking into the dresser where I'd left my phone charging. The connecting door to my parents' room burst open, and my dad came charging in wearing nothing but his boxers, wielding the hotel room's iron like a weapon. He was shouting something, asking what was wrong, but his voice sounded muffled and distant, even though he was right there. I pointed at the man, tried to say, "There's someone here," but my dad was already scanning the room, flipping on every light switch he could find. The sudden brightness made me squint, and in that split second of adjustment, the intruder moved, not toward the door to the hallway like you'd expect, but back toward the balcony. He was fast for someone his size, practically diving through the sliding door. My dad ran after him, yanked the curtains fully open, and stepped out onto the balcony. I could hear him yelling, looking over the railing, checking both directions, but there was nothing. No rope, no ladder, no indication of how someone could have gotten up or down from a 7th-floor balcony. My mom and Katie crowded into the room, my sister crying and my mom's face pale with worry. She kept asking if I was hurt, checking my arms and face like she was looking for injuries. My dad came back inside, his expression a mix of confusion and anger. He wanted to believe me. I could see it in his eyes, but the logical part of his brain was struggling with the impossibility of it. That's when I remembered the mud. I pointed to the carpet, and we all looked down at the dark, wet footprints leading from the balcony door to my bed and back again. My dad's whole demeanor changed. He grabbed the hotel phone and called the front desk, demanding security come up immediately. Within 10 minutes, my room was full of people. 2 security guards, the night manager, and eventually 2 police officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else at 4 in the morning. They took photos of the footprints, dusted the balcony door for fingerprints, and asked me to describe the man at least a dozen times. The security footage revealed something that still makes my skin prickle when I think about it. The cameras in the hallway showed nobody entering or leaving our room through the main door all night. But here's where it gets worse. The hotel had been having issues with their exterior cameras for weeks, so there was no footage of the outside of the building. One of the security guards, a younger guy named Carlos, pulled my dad aside and told him something that the manager clearly didn't want us to know. 2 other guests had reported similar incidents in the past month, always on higher floors, always involving someone entering through balcony doors that should have been impossible to access. The hotel had been quietly investigating, assuming it was either an inside job or someone with climbing equipment. But they'd found nothing. No gear left behind, no suspicious employees, no explanation for how someone could scale a smooth concrete wall 7 stories up. Carlos said they'd been telling guests it was probably nightmares or sleep disturbances, but the muddy footprints in my room were the first physical evidence anyone had documented. The police had me look through what felt like hundreds of mugshots on a tablet, local criminals and registered offenders, but I didn't recognize anyone. The man's face was burned into my memory, but it wasn't in their system. They asked about the camera, if I remembered what kind it was or if the flash had any distinctive color. All I could tell them was that it was silver and small, like the old Canon power shots everyone had in the 2000s. One officer, a woman with kind eyes named Officer Gomez, sat with me while my parents dealt with the hotel management. She told me about something called sleep paralysis episodes and how sometimes the brain can create incredibly vivid hallucinations during them. I could tell she was trying to give me an out, a way to rationalize what happened, but then she looked at those muddy footprints and shook her head. "But those are real," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Those are definitely real." She gave me her card and told me to call if I remembered anything else or if I needed to talk to someone about what happened. The hotel moved us to a different room on the 3rd floor for the rest of the night, comped our entire stay, and offered us free vacation packages that my dad refused to even look at. We packed up and left that morning, cutting our vacation short by 3 days. During the drive home, nobody really talked about it. Katie slept most of the way, and my parents kept exchanging these worried glances in the rearview mirror. I spent the entire 12 hours searching online for anything about the Coral Bay Resort, finding scattered posts on travel forums about strange experiences and unexplained visitors that the hotel had apparently been pretty good at keeping quiet. One post from 2016 described almost exactly what happened to me: the sleep paralysis, the balcony entrance, even the old digital camera. The person said they'd hired a private investigator afterward, who discovered that a maintenance worker had been fired from the hotel in 2015 for inappropriate behavior, but still had copies of master key cards and potentially building blueprints. But there was no arrest record, no resolution, just theories and fear. 6 months later, I got a call from Officer Gomez. They'd arrested someone, a former hotel employee named Eugene Watts, who'd been living in a van in the hotel's overflow parking lot, the one they used for staff vehicles behind the main building. He had climbing gear, multiple cameras with hundreds of photos of sleeping guests, and a notebook with room numbers and dates. He'd been a maintenance supervisor for 8 years before being fired for entering guest rooms without authorization. He knew every blind spot, every camera angle, and had kept his keycard programmer when they'd let him go. The climbing equipment explained the balcony entrances. He'd been rappelling down from the roof, entering through balconies, taking photos, and then climbing back up. He'd been doing it for over 2 years. They found pictures of me on one of his cameras, that bright flash photo of me paralyzed in bed. Officer Gomez said he'd confessed to everything, claimed he just liked watching people sleep, liked the feeling of being invisible in their most vulnerable moments. He got 15 years. I still can't sleep in hotels without checking the balcony door 3 times and pushing a chair against it. And sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning, my body tense, waiting for the sound of sliding glass. February of '94 was colder than usual in southern Illinois. The kind of cold that seeps through your jacket no matter how many layers you wear. I was 43 then, working homicide for a small department, right where Interstate 64 cuts through miles of nothing but truck stops and budget motels. That Tuesday morning started with black coffee and a stack of paperwork until the phone rang around 12:30. Dead woman at the Blue Moon Inn, one of those places where you pay cash and the clerk barely looks up from his newspaper. The maid who found her, Gloria, was sitting in the lobby when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. She had chipped purple nail polish and kept staring at the floor while she told me how the guest hadn't answered for checkout, how she'd used her master key, how she'd screamed so loud the maintenance guy came running from 3 buildings over. Gloria said she'd never seen anything like it, the way the woman looked so peaceful, like a photograph. The victim was arranged on the bed with a precision that made my chest tighten. Hands folded across her stomach, hair fanned out on the pillow in perfect symmetry. Even her shoes placed neatly by the nightstand. The whole room reeked of industrial-strength cleaner, that sharp ammonia smell that makes your eyes water. Dr. Hutchinson, our medical examiner who always kept peppermint gum in his coat pocket, spent 3 hours going over the scene. No fingerprints except the victim's, no DNA evidence, no signs of struggle. The killer had wiped down every surface, doorknobs, light switches, faucets, even the TV remote. Hutchinson found faint ligature marks on her neck, so subtle they were almost invisible. Something soft had been used, maybe a silk scarf or fabric belt, and whoever did it had taken it with them. Based on liver temperature and rigor, she'd been dead since Sunday night. But the Do Not Disturb sign had bought the killer almost 40 hours before discovery. Her name was Lisa Thornton, 34, traveling alone from Michigan to visit her sister in Texas. She checked in Saturday afternoon, paid for 2 nights in cash, and the clerk, an older guy named Frank who chewed tobacco and watched game shows all day, said she'd seemed normal, maybe a little tired from driving. Her car, a blue sedan with Michigan plates, was still in the parking lot with her suitcase in the trunk, untouched. Nothing valuable was missing from the room. Her purse still had $80 and credit cards inside. We interviewed every guest who'd been at the motel that weekend, but it was the kind of place where people minded their own business and kept their doors locked. Nobody heard anything unusual Sunday night. The couple in the room next door had been arguing about money, loud enough that 2 other guests complained, but they swore they never heard anything from Lisa's room. The killer had been quiet, controlled, invisible. 6 weeks later, I got a call from a detective in Kentucky, right across the river. They'd found a woman at the Sunset Lodge just off I-64, about 90 miles east of our crime scene. Same setup, body arranged perfectly on the bed, room wiped clean, soft strangulation marks that you'd miss if you weren't looking for them. The victim was Nancy Caldwell, 29, a pharmaceutical sales rep from Memphis who'd been making her rounds through small-town medical offices. She'd been dead 2 days when housekeeping found her, that familiar "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the door handle. The detective, a guy named Garrett with a thick accent and a habit of clicking his pen while he talked, said their forensics team couldn't find anything useful. The killer had even wiped down the toilet handle and the inside doorknob, places most people wouldn't think about. We started comparing notes, and the similarities made my skin prickle. Both women traveling alone, both staying at cheap motels right off the interstate, both killed on Sunday nights. The third body turned up in early May, this time in Missouri. The Gateway Rest Stop, another budget motel that had seen better days, with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign missing half its letters. Rebecca Dalton, 41, a divorced real estate agent heading to a conference in St. Louis. Same Sunday night death, same meticulous crime scene, same invisible killer. By then, Garrett and I had brought in the FBI, and they sent 2 agents who looked like they'd stepped out of a recruiting poster. Clean-cut, serious, carrying leather briefcases that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. They set up a task force, created a geographic profile, analyzed traffic patterns along I-64. The corridor was perfect for someone who didn't want to be remembered. Hundreds of miles of identical motels, exhausted travelers who just wanted a bed for the night, desk clerks who'd seen too much to care about another face passing through. We pulled registration records from dozens of motels, looking for someone who'd been at all 3 locations around the time of the murders. The pattern held through summer and into fall. Julie Hoffman in Indiana, strangled on a Sunday night at the Traveler's Rest. Carolyn Pierce at the Highway Haven near Evansville. Each time, the killer got better at being invisible. They started varying the days between discovery, sometimes leaving the sign up for 3 days, sometimes just 1. But always that same careful positioning of the body, always that obsessive cleaning of the scene. I'd lie awake thinking about him, and I was sure it was a him. Something about the strength needed for the strangulation, the height required to position the bodies just so. He had to be someone who looked completely ordinary, someone who could walk through a motel lobby without anyone giving him a second glance. Maybe a salesman with a regular route, maybe a trucker, maybe just someone who liked driving that stretch of highway, hunting. We interviewed hundreds of people that year. Motel employees, regular guests, truckers who ran that route weekly, sales reps who covered the territory. I remember this one guy, Walter Briggs, who sold medical supplies and had been within 50 miles of 3 of the murders. He was nervous during questioning, sweating through his white shirt, hands trembling as he showed us his receipts. Turned out he was having an affair and thought his wife had hired us. Another suspect was a night shift worker named Howard, who delivered newspapers to several of the motels. He had these pale gray eyes that never seemed to blink, and he knew every back road and shortcut along the interstate. We watched him for 2 months, but his alibi for the Kentucky murder was solid. He'd been in the hospital getting his appendix removed. The FBI profiler, a woman named Agent Morse who wore her hair in a tight bun and took notes in shorthand, said we were looking for someone with above-average intelligence, possibly military or law enforcement background, someone who understood evidence and crime scenes. The worst part was talking to the families. Lisa Thornton's sister drove up from Texas, a small woman with the same red hair, who kept asking if Lisa had suffered. I told her it had been quick, which was probably true, but I couldn't tell her that her sister had been positioned like a doll, that someone had taken their time arranging her body after she was gone. Rebecca Dalton's teenage son, tall and awkward with braces, stood in my office without saying a word, while his grandmother explained they just wanted to know why. Julie Hoffman's husband broke down completely, said they'd been trying to have kids, that she'd been driving to see a fertility specialist. These weren't random victims to their families. They were real people with plans and hopes and favorite songs on the radio. But to the killer, they were just opportunities, women alone in the wrong place at the wrong time, perfect for whatever sick ritual he was performing. By December of '94, we had 6 bodies and no solid leads. The task force was meeting every week in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and frustration. We had a map on the wall with red pins for each murder, trying to find a pattern beyond the obvious. The murders were spaced out geographically, but all within a 300-mile stretch of I-64. The FBI brought in a computer expert who ran algorithms trying to predict the next location, but the killer wasn't following any mathematical logic we could find. Then we caught what we thought was a break. A desk clerk at a motel in Effingham, a young kid named Justin who was working nights to pay for college, called in about a guest who'd made him uncomfortable. The man had requested a room at the far end of the building, paid cash, and had been very particular about not wanting housekeeping. He'd been carrying a small black duffel bag and wearing maintenance-type clothes, the kind of generic blue work shirt that wouldn't stand out anywhere. Justin had noticed him because the guy had come back to the desk around midnight to buy a vending machine snack, and his hands had been red and raw, like he'd been scrubbing them repeatedly. The man had paid for the chips with exact change, counting out the coins carefully, and Justin said there was something mechanical about his movements, like he was concentrating on appearing normal. We rushed to the motel, but the guest had already checked out early that morning, leaving the room spotless. And I mean spotless. The cleaning staff said it looked like no one had even stayed there. The bed was made with military precision, the bathroom smelled of bleach, even the carpet had been vacuumed in perfect lines. We dusted for prints but found nothing. The registration card had a fake name and address, and the license plate Justin had written down belonged to a car that had been junked 2 years earlier. We staked out the motel for the next 3 Sundays, but he never came back. The 7th victim was discovered in January '95, but something was different this time. Angela Foster, 37, was found at the Riverside Inn near Vincennes, but she'd fought back. There were defensive wounds on her hands, skin under her fingernails, and the room showed signs of a struggle. A lamp knocked over, the curtains torn partially off the rod. The killer had still managed to clean most of the scene, but in his hurry, he'd left something behind. A partial footprint in blood near the bathroom door, size 10 work boot, common brand sold everywhere. More importantly, Angela had managed to scratch him deep enough to draw blood. We got DNA from under her nails, ran it through every database we had access to, but no matches. He wasn't in the system. The medical examiner said Angela had almost gotten away. There were bruises indicating she'd made it to the door before he caught her. She'd been a fighter, a personal trainer from Louisville who probably had more strength than he'd expected. After Angela, the murders stopped. Just stopped. We waited, watched, kept the task force running for another year. But nothing. We never caught him. That's the part that eats at me, even now, almost 30 years later. 7 women dead, and he just vanished. The FBI profiler thought Angela Foster had scared him, made him realize he was getting sloppy, taking too many risks. Maybe he moved his hunting ground somewhere else. Maybe he died. Maybe he just decided 7 was enough. I retired in 2001, but I kept copies of all the files, and every few years I go through them again, looking for something we missed. I think about him sometimes when I'm driving and pass one of those old motels. Most of them closed now or converted into something else. I wonder if he's out there, some regular-looking guy in his 60s or 70s now, living a normal life, keeping his secret. The DNA sample is still in evidence, waiting. Technology gets better every year, and maybe someday we'll get a match. Until then, I keep the victims' photos in my desk drawer. Lisa, Nancy, Rebecca, Julie, Carolyn, Angela. 7 women who deserved better than becoming just another cold case, another pattern in a map of red pins that never led anywhere. The GPS kept recalculating as I searched for the Crossroads Inn somewhere outside Columbus, my eyes barely staying open after 12 hours behind the wheel. I'd left Philadelphia around noon after a client meeting that ran way too long, and now at nearly midnight, every mile felt like torture. I'm a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company, basically means I live in hotels and conference rooms, shaking hands and explaining why our MRI machines are worth the investment. At 34, I'd gotten pretty good at the nomad lifestyle. Knew which rest stops had decent coffee, which hotel chains had the firmest mattresses. But that particular Wednesday in late September was testing every ounce of patience I had left. My phone showed 11:47 p.m. when I finally spotted the faded sign through the drizzle that had started somewhere around Wheeling. Just needed a bed, a shower, maybe some vending machine dinner if I could stay awake long enough to eat it. The kid at the front desk looked half asleep himself, couldn't have been more than 20, wearing a polyester vest that was 2 sizes too big. He kept yawning while pecking at the keyboard with 2 fingers, squinting at the monitor like the text was written in hieroglyphics. The lobby had that familiar smell, part bleach, part mildew, part something indefinable that every budget hotel seems to cultivate. After what felt like an eternity of watching him hunt and peck, he finally slid a key card across the counter without even looking up. Room 237, 2nd floor, down the hall to the right. I grabbed my overnight bag, the one with the broken zipper I kept meaning to replace, and headed for the elevator. The hallways were completely silent except for the hum of ice machines and the distant sound of a TV bleeding through someone's door. When I got to 237, there was already a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging from the handle, which struck me as weird, but I figured housekeeping just forgot to take it down. I swiped the card and heard that familiar electronic beep, the little light flashing green. The door clicked open and I pushed inside, fumbling for the light switch along the wall. The room was pitch black, but right away something felt wrong. The air was too warm, too lived in, like someone had been there for days. My fingers found the switch, and when the lights came on, my brain took a second to process what I was seeing. The bed was a complete mess, sheets twisted and thrown back, pillows scattered. There were clothes draped over the chair by the window, jeans, a leather jacket, work boots on the floor. A half-eaten pizza sat in an open box on the desk, and the TV was paused on some action movie I didn't recognize. Empty beer bottles lined the nightstand, and there was an open suitcase on the luggage rack with clothes spilling out of it. This wasn't a room waiting for me. Someone was already here. Had been here for a while by the looks of it. Before I could even think about backing out, I heard the bathroom door creak. The sound made every muscle in my body tense up, that primitive part of your brain screaming that you're somewhere you shouldn't be. A man stepped out, massive guy, probably 6'4", wearing nothing but boxers and a white undershirt that barely contained his barrel chest. His face was already red, veins standing out on his neck, eyes narrowed to slits. He had that look of someone who'd been drinking but wasn't quite drunk, that dangerous middle ground where anger comes easy. "What the hell are you doing in my room?" His voice was low, gravelly, the kind that probably sounded threatening even when he was ordering coffee. He took a step forward and I instinctively stepped back, my bag hitting the door frame behind me. The key card was still in my hand, and I held it up like some kind of pathetic shield, trying to explain about the front desk, the mix-up, how I was just given this room number. "Get out. Get out right now, or I'm calling the cops." He reached for something on the dresser, his phone, and I saw his hands were covered in old tattoos, the kind that blur at the edges, probably done decades ago. But then he stopped, stared at me harder, and his expression changed from angry to something else, something worse. "Wait a minute. You're not just lost, are you? You've been watching me. I've seen you before, downstairs in the parking lot." I had no idea what he was talking about, tried to tell him I'd just arrived, just checked in 5 minutes ago, but he wasn't listening anymore. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath mixed with something sharp, like menthol cigarettes. "You think I'm stupid? Think I don't notice when someone's casing my room?" His hand went to the dresser again, but this time he grabbed something else, a folding knife that he flipped open with practiced ease. The hallway behind me suddenly felt like the safest place in the world, and I stumbled backward through the doorway, my bag catching on the frame and spilling open. My laptop, folders, phone charger, everything scattered across the worn carpet. "I'm calling the front desk right now," I managed to say, my voice coming out higher than normal, already pulling out my phone. But he followed me into the hallway, still in his underwear, not caring who might see. "Yeah, you do that. Tell them how you broke into my room. Tell them how you've been following me." Other doors started opening. An elderly woman in curlers peeked out from 235. A younger couple emerged from 239, all of them staring at this scene unfolding. The man was getting louder, angrier, waving the knife as he talked, accusing me of things that made no sense. Said I'd been in the hotel bar earlier, that I'd asked the bartender about him, that I'd followed him from some casino downtown. None of it was true, but he believed every word he was saying, completely convinced I was there to rob him, or worse. I kept backing down the hallway, trying to dial the front desk while keeping an eye on him. My fingers were trembling so bad I could barely hit the right numbers. The elderly woman had already slammed her door shut, but the couple was frozen, the guy recording everything on his phone while his girlfriend tugged at his arm. The big man kept advancing, ranting about how he had cash in his room, how he knew people like me, how he wasn't going to be a victim. "Sir, please, just call the front desk yourself," I pleaded, but it was like talking to a wall. He suddenly lunged forward, not quite attacking, but close enough that I dropped my phone. It clattered on the floor and slid under a housekeeping cart someone had left in the hallway. When I bent down to grab it, he must have thought I was reaching for something else because he started yelling, "He's got a weapon! This guy's got a weapon!" Even though my hands were completely empty, even though anyone could see I was just trying to get my phone back. The couple finally ran back to their room, and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. Now it was just me and him in that narrow hallway with its ugly geometric carpet and fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly green. He had me backed up against the ice machine alcove, the knife still in his hand, his face getting redder by the second. That's when I heard the elevator ding at the end of the hall. The kid from the front desk stepped out, took one look at the scene. A half-naked giant with a knife, me pressed against the wall, belongings scattered everywhere, and immediately went pale. "Mr. Fitzgerald?" he called out to the big man. Is everything okay? And that's when I realized the horrible truth. The kid knew this guest, knew his name, which meant Fitzgerald had probably been staying here for several days. I was the stranger, the intruder, the one who didn't belong. "This man broke into my room," Fitzgerald shouted, pointing the knife at me. The desk clerk looked at me, confused, and I saw him pull out his phone, probably to call either security or the police, and I knew how this was going to look. Wait, I practically shouted at the kid. "You gave me the key card. Room 237, check your computer, check your system." The kid hesitated, looking between me and Fitzgerald, clearly not sure what to do. Fitzgerald took this moment to grab my scattered papers from the floor, holding them up like evidence. "Look at this, he's got all kinds of documents, probably fake IDs, credit cards. Check his bag." The way he was spinning the story, even I was starting to feel guilty, like maybe I had done something wrong. The kid was backing toward the elevator, keeping his distance from both of us. "Sir, I need you both to calm down. I'm calling my manager." But Fitzgerald wasn't having it. He threw my papers in the air, letting them flutter down like confetti, then kicked my laptop bag down the hall. "This piece of trash has been stalking me for 2 days. I want him arrested." 2 days. I'd been in Philadelphia 2 days ago, had the receipts to prove it. But who was going to listen to me now? That's when everything shifted into pure chaos. Fitzgerald suddenly rushed at me, maybe thinking I was going to run, maybe just fed up with waiting. The knife was still in his right hand, but he reached for me with his left, grabbing a handful of my shirt. I could smell his sweat, see every broken blood vessel in his eyes, feel his breath hot on my face. Pure instinct kicked in, and I shoved him as hard as I could. He stumbled backward, his bare feet slipping on the smooth carpet, and crashed into a room service tray someone had left outside their door. Plates and glasses shattered, food went everywhere, and Fitzgerald went down hard, the knife skittering away under a door. The sound was tremendous in that enclosed space, like someone had dropped a whole kitchen's worth of dishes. More doors opened, more faces appeared, and someone started screaming. Fitzgerald was trying to get up, slipping on mashed potatoes or whatever it was, cursing and threatening to kill me. The desk clerk was frantically talking on his phone now, and I heard him say police and assault and give the hotel address. I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I ran. Not toward the elevator where the clerk was standing, but to the stairwell at the opposite end of the hall. Behind me, I could hear Fitzgerald roaring, hear the desk clerk yelling for me to stop, hear doors slamming as guests locked themselves in. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my dress shoes sliding on the metal edges, one hand on the railing to keep from falling. My car keys were still in my pocket, thank God, but everything else, my laptop, my work files, my phone, was scattered all over that second-floor hallway. I burst through the exit door into the parking lot, the cool September air hitting my face like a slap. My rental car, a silver Nissan Altima, was parked near the back, and I sprinted for it, fumbling with the key fob. The locks clicked open just as I heard the stairwell door bang open behind me. Fitzgerald had followed, still in his underwear, barefoot on the asphalt, screaming threats and obscenities that echoed across the parking lot. I gunned the engine and peeled out of there, watching in the rearview mirror as Fitzgerald stood in the middle of the lot, illuminated by the harsh security lights, looking like some deranged character from a nightmare. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I drove for maybe 20 minutes before pulling into a well-lit gas station, sitting there with the engine running, trying to figure out what to do. No phone, no laptop, no way to call anyone, or even check into another hotel. I ended up driving straight through to Cincinnati, found an all-night diner, and used their phone to call my credit card company to report my cards potentially compromised. The next morning, I called my boss from a payphone. They still had one at a truck stop, and tried to explain why I'd missed my morning meeting. 2 weeks later, a detective from Columbus called my office. They'd found my things and wanted to return them, but also wanted my side of the story. Turns out Fitzgerald had a history of paranoid episodes, had been off his medication, and had been asked to leave 2 other hotels that month. The Crossroads Inn had meant to move him to a different room that night, but never updated their system. Room 237 was supposed to be empty, ready for me, but their mistake nearly got me arrested or worse. I got my stuff back eventually, but I never stayed at that chain again, and now I always double-check at the front desk if they're absolutely sure the room is empty. I had been on a short trip for work and decided to save money by staying at a mid-range hotel just off the highway. Nothing remarkable about the place, just a 4-story building with that faint smell of chlorine from the pool clinging to the lobby. I checked in late sometime after dinner and was honestly relieved to have a quiet night ahead of me. My routine back then was pretty simple. Finish my notes for the day, order something small from the vending machine, and collapse in front of the TV until I fell asleep. That night, though, I ended up outside a little longer than usual because I needed to grab a few things from my car in the back lot. Walking across the lot, I noticed a man in a dark jacket moving a few rows over. At first, I thought nothing of it. It wasn't unusual for guests to come and go. But as I unlocked my car, I realized he wasn't heading toward a vehicle. He was pacing slowly, almost in sync with me, and each time I glanced his way, he angled his face down, like he didn't want me to catch a clear look at him. My gut told me to hurry. I pulled the small bag I needed from the passenger seat, locked up, and made for the side entrance that required a keycard. The second I pushed into the hallway, I heard the heavy metal door creak again behind me. Someone else had slipped in, closing the distance faster than I expected. My room was on the 3rd floor, but I didn't want to lead a stranger straight to where I'd be sleeping. Instead, I cut toward the stairwell at the end of the hall, telling myself it was just paranoia, that maybe he really was a guest. But when I hit the door and shoved it open, the stairwell felt colder, emptier, like a place you weren't supposed to linger. I hurried down toward the fire exit on the ground level, thinking I could step out, loop around the building, and come back through the front desk where staff were still awake. That plan collapsed when I hit the final landing. The red metal bar on the door should have pushed open easily, but a heavy chain wrapped around the handles outside rattled against the frame. Someone had secured it tight, as if they didn't want anyone escaping that way. The sound of footsteps above grew sharper, echoing down the stairwell, each step deliberate, closing in. I remember gripping the railing, my heart pounding louder than the thud of those approaching steps. For a split second I considered shouting, hoping someone in a nearby room might hear, but my voice caught in my throat. The air smelled faintly of dust and old paint, like no one had been down there in ages. I pressed against the chain door again, rattling it harder this time, but the links clinked like mocking laughter. Whoever chained it shut had made sure it wasn't budging. Retreating upward felt like walking into a trap, but it was the only option I had. I started back up, my shoes squeaking slightly on the concrete stairs. The footsteps above slowed, like the person had realized I had nowhere else to go. Every turn of the stairwell gave me just enough time to imagine what kind of face I'd see if I pushed through the next door. Was it a hotel employee? Another guest messing with me? Or someone who had been waiting for me since I first stepped out of my car? By the time I reached the 2nd floor, I pushed into the hallway, trying to act like I belonged there, like I hadn't just panicked in the stairwell. The corridor stretched out with patterned carpet that muffled my steps, and the hum of vending machines somewhere down the hall gave the illusion of normalcy. I glanced back, expecting to see the stairwell door open, but it stayed shut. Still, I couldn't shake the rhythm of those shoes following mine. It was burned into my ears, even if the sound had stopped. I moved quickly toward an intersecting hallway, hoping I could loop around and circle back to the lobby. Every door I passed looked the same, but my eyes kept catching on details I hadn't noticed before. A handle with deep scratches near the lock, a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging upside down, one room with the faint sound of a television but no light seeping from the crack under the door. It was like the building itself was watching, each small imperfection standing out as I tried to convince myself I wasn't being hunted. Halfway down that hallway, I finally caught the faint reflection of movement in the glass frame of a picture on the wall. Someone was stepping out of the stairwell, careful and slow. The reflection only showed a sliver, a dark sleeve, a hand adjusting something at their side. I didn't wait to see more. I turned the corner and forced myself not to run, but my legs were shaking so badly it barely made a difference. My keycard felt slick in my pocket as I slid my fingers over it again and again, trying to keep calm until I reached the lobby. When I rounded into the main hallway, the change in lighting nearly blinded me. The lobby's glow was sharp compared to the dim corridors, and for the first time since leaving my car, I saw another person, the night clerk sitting behind the counter. I walked straight up, leaned in, and whispered that someone had followed me inside and the fire exit downstairs was chained shut. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he stood and grabbed the phone to call the manager. I turned to glance behind me, but the hallway I had just come from was empty. Security footage was pulled a little later. The clerk showed me the screen, grainy but clear enough. A man trailing several steps behind me in the parking lot, then slipping in through the side door. The last frame caught him pausing at the stairwell door, hand pressed against it, before the feed cut out as he moved inside. No one ever saw him leave. They checked the halls, the lot, even the service areas, but he had vanished. The chain on the fire exit was still there when the manager went down to check, but no staff admitted to putting it on. I barely slept that night. By morning, I checked out early, the chain still rattling in my memory. I've stayed in plenty of hotels since, but I always test the stairwell doors now. Always check who's behind me when I cross a parking lot. To this day, I don't know if the man was a guest, an employee, or someone with a much worse reason for being there. All I know is that if the chain hadn't been on that door, I might have had a way out. Instead, I walked back into the unknown, and I've never felt safe in a hotel hallway again. There's a night from a trip a few years back that still creeps into my thoughts when I stay in hotels. At the time, I was in my mid-20s, traveling with 3 close friends for a weekend getaway. We'd booked a modest downtown hotel, nothing luxurious, just a place with clean rooms and a decent lobby bar. That night we'd gone out, had a few drinks, and were heading back around midnight, still laughing about random things that had happened earlier in the evening. We piled into the elevator, the 4 of us half tired but still buzzing with that lighthearted mood. Just as the doors were about to close, a man slipped in. He was wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his head. The strings tightened in a way that made his face hard to see. What struck me first was how he didn't say a word, not even a nod of acknowledgement, just pressed his thumb firmly on the close button like he wanted to make absolutely sure no one else got in. The ride up felt heavier than it should have. None of us spoke after he entered. I couldn't even hear him breathing, just the hum of the elevator cables and the faint rattle of the machinery. The floor numbers lit up one by one, agonizingly slow. When we reached our floor, the doors opened, and instead of letting us go first, he stepped aside slightly, as if to usher us out. It was polite in theory, but the way he watched us leave made my stomach knot. Then, without hesitation, he walked out right behind us. The hallway was long and quiet, carpet muffling our steps, but his sneakers echoed faintly behind us. We weren't exactly subtle about where we were headed, since we went straight down the hall and stopped at our door. My friend Marcus swiped the key card, whispering under his breath about how weird that guy was, while I kept glancing back. The man didn't say anything, didn't even slow down. He just trailed us until we disappeared into the room and locked the door. At first, we laughed it off, calling it creepy but harmless. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just shown a stranger exactly where we were staying. We tried to distract ourselves by flipping on the TV, ordering some late-night snacks from the vending machine down the hall, and joking about who was going to pass out first. Still, every so often I caught myself replaying the image of that hooded guy standing just a step behind us. The hotel corridors weren't busy, so if he had been on our floor for any legitimate reason, we should have at least heard another door open or close. But the hallway stayed silent after we went in, which only added to the unease. Around 2 in the morning, long after the laughter had died down and the room was quiet, A sharp electronic beep cut through the silence. It was the sound of a keycard being swiped against our door. At first, I thought maybe someone had gotten lost, but then it happened again. And again. A deliberate, repeated swipe, each one followed by the soft thud of a handle being tested. My friends sat up instantly, and Marcus whispered, "That's him. It has to be." None of us moved closer to the door, but we were all wide awake, listening. The swiping went on for maybe half a minute, longer than anyone accidentally trying the wrong room. Whoever was out there wasn't drunk or confused. They were focused. The red light of a failed attempt probably kept flashing over and over, but we didn't dare peek through the peephole. We just stayed frozen in our beds, waiting for it to stop. I remember the tension in the room was so thick that even breathing felt like it could give us away. Eventually, the noise stopped, but not because hotel staff intervened or another guest came by. It ended in an abrupt silence, like whoever was outside realized it wasn't going to work and backed away. We didn't hear footsteps, though. No retreating down the hall, no elevator chime. Just that stillness pressing in from the other side of the door. I laid there with my eyes locked on the shadows stretching across the ceiling, convinced that if we made the slightest sound, the handle would start jiggling again. When daylight finally crept through the thin curtains, we realized none of us had slept more than a few scattered minutes. The fear of opening that door lingered, but eventually Marcus insisted we needed to check the hallway. He swung the door open quickly, like ripping off a bandage, while the rest of us stayed back. Nothing. The hallway looked exactly the same as the night before. Silent, empty, undisturbed. The only thing that hinted at what had happened were faint smudges around the card reader on our door, like someone had been pressing against it with more force than necessary. We went down to the front desk to ask if security had noticed anything, or if there had been reports of someone wandering the floors. The woman at the desk scrolled through her screen, frowning, and said no incidents were logged. She even suggested maybe another guest had simply confused their room. But when Marcus asked if our door had been accessed by a staff card during the night, her face tightened. She admitted the system showed no entries, not even attempts. According to their records, nobody had swiped a card on our door at all. That detail rattled me the most. We'd all heard it loud and clear over and over again in the dark. The electronic beep, the metallic click of the handle trying to turn. It wasn't something we imagined, and there were 4 of us who could vouch for it. Yet the hotel's system insisted nothing had ever happened. The front desk clerk offered to move us to a different floor, but by then we were too uneasy to spend another night there. We packed our bags and left before checkout, grabbing coffee from a drive-thru just to get out of that place faster. Even now, I still think about that hooded man in the elevator and the sound of the card reader on our door. Maybe he found a way to mask his attempts, or maybe there's something about that hotel I'll never understand. What I do know is that we gave away our exact room to a stranger, and hours later someone tried to get in. It's been years, but anytime I hear the beep of a hotel keycard, I'm instantly taken back to that long night where silence on the other side of the door felt more threatening than any noise.